Welcome to Ed Talks. My name is David Slomp. I'm the Board of Governors Teaching Chair here at the University of Lethbridge. And with me is Dr. Erasmus Okine, the Vice President of Research here at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, David.
Thank you for being here and sharing your experience and
I'm
your
very happy to be here.
Yeah,
very happy to be here.
Well, I thought maybe to give viewers some context, it would be nice to just give them a bit of a highlight over the career. What does it look like from a graduate student to the Vice President of Research? What are the highlights of that career?
That's a tough question, David. And maybe to give away my age. Originally from Ghana, I did my undergrad and part of my graduate studies at the University of Ghana. I was in agriculture. That was where my passion has always been. And in terms of getting good grades, I was a very studious student. I had passionate teachers, who led me. So it was a no-brainer that I would get into graduate school. And in graduate school, I did a lot of work on the research side and taking a look at what is called African trypanosomiasis, sleeping sickness, basically. So I was one of the very first to try and understand how the trypanosome gets into the bloodstream and affects the brain and makes people have mental issues. I did that, but in doing so, we realized that some of the reagents that I needed could not necessarily be available when I was ready to use them. So the government decided to send me to Britain. Okay. And in Britain, I met Rodney Porter. Rodney Porter was a Nobel Prize winner, and he accepted me to work in his lab. And in terms of interacting with a supervisor, Rodney Porter has always been and will always be the very best that I've had. The topic was trying to understand immunology and how it affects humans. However, in terms of his teaching techniques, it was not necessarily go and learn this, go and learn that. It was how do you get from point A to point B by asking questions, and having an interaction with him, just like I'm having with you. And I remember, this is now 1985 or so, or actually in the early 80s, 81. I would meet with him for 1 hour. He would have given me the question a week before. I would research it and have a conversation with him with the questions. And that for me was incredible. So I went back after doing the lab work, went back, defended in Ghana, and then I was awarded a Commonwealth Scholarship to either go back to Britain or come to Canada. And I came to Canada because of two names: Gary Matheson, a professor at the University of Alberta, and Larry Milligan, a professor at the University of Alberta. Why? Because they were the two foremost animal biochemists in the world. Again, very different teaching styles. Gary was more like content. Larry was more like open book. How do you connect the dots? In terms of biochemistry. So Leninger was the biochemistry book at that time. How do you connect the dots? So for example, one of the projects I had was to say, hey, there was somebody who was fasting or whatever, refusing to eat at the in Ottawa at the Parliament Hill. And my project was to find out what was happening to him in terms of biochemistry every day. In terms of the pathways, he was using glucose, the pathways he was using fat, the pathways he was using protein, how long he was going to live, and all those were some of the practical things that I did. My model animal, though, was not human. For my PhD, it was the cow. So back to agriculture. So I started studying methane production, rose through the ranks, had a lot of experience. And one time the government wanted a researcher in agriculture. So I was seconded from the U of A to Alberta Agriculture, working with industry, trying to understand what was necessary for them to be be animals to be productive and for them to make a profit. And for me, the question was reduction of methane and how that increases efficiency of productivity.
Yeah.
So yes, assistant professor, associate professor, full professor.
Yeah.
Then a council of wise people came to me and said, relative to my leadership style, they wanted me to get into administration.
Right.
So I became the chair. I became associate vice president academic, associate vice president research at the University of Alberta.
Yeah.
And from then, there was this big opportunity at the University of Lethbridge.
Yeah.
So from undergrad, graduate, assistant, associate, full professor, associate vice president academic, associate vice president research, vice president research in this place. Yeah. And I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you. I know it's been great for the institution so far. So I had the privilege of visiting you in your office, and I couldn't help but see the number of teaching awards that you've won during your career. Are there any that stand out for you that are highlights for you? And if so, what?
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up, David. It's for me, teaching has always been my passion.
Yeah.
And it may be due to the number of people I've interacted with. But can you imagine getting into a classroom and being able to create an environment for the students to really excel, where no question is silly or stupid, but they feel free to interact with you. And then you see the lights go on. You see the lights come on. That to me, it's incredible. So yes, I've been very happy in terms of the rewards of teaching, including the one, I used to be in the Maclean's magazine as one of the popular professors at the U of A. So if you go back to the early 80s, 90s, and even in the early 200s, in mid 200s, you find me almost always mentioned in the annual, reports. I've been one of the popular professors. But the one which stands out, since that was your question, was the one given to me by the student union at the University of Alberta. It's called the Salute, and it's not given lightly because they send people in to actually observe you teach. They canvass the students all across campus relative to who's going to be awarded the salute. And that one is very, very close to my heart. So yes, you saw it, and it is closest to the door. The reason is simple. I want people to see the interface of research and teaching, and that there's no daylight between the research activity and the teaching activity. They inform each other. So yes, I'm Vice President Research, but I want to send the message loud and clear that research does not come at the expense of teaching, and teaching does not come at the expense of research. The best teachers, to me, are some of the best researchers.
Yeah, there's this misconception sometimes out there that you build your teaching excellence at the expense of research excellence. And could you talk maybe a little bit more about how do you see excellence, the pursuit of excellence in teaching and the pursuit of excellence in research? How do you see them complementing and supporting each other?
And for me, I'll use my personal experience. I mean, if you don't mind. One can take a course and just take a look at the content and go and tell the students, this is the way the world is. Especially in biochemistry and physiology and nutrition, it's easy to do that. But how do I take those questions that I'm trying to answer and use them as real life examples in the classroom? How do I get the students in working in groups to try and answer those same questions, even though they may not be doing the research in that part? That interconnection, David, I mean, it is absolutely essential. And you see the enthusiasm by which they say, oh, what I'm learning is not an abstract. What I'm learning has real consequences in the real world. And it is by the interaction of the research part of it and say, oh, that is what it's doing. So for example, reducing methane, we can write the equations of how methane is formed. We can write the equations in terms of the effect on the greenhouse gas. But to see that the cow produces methane, and this is what we are trying to do to mitigate the production of methane, and to realize that yes, 50% of the human population produce methane because it depends on the microbiome you have. That brings it home to them. It's not abstract, it's real. You know, that's the way I see it. There's always an interconnection between research and teaching, and it is incumbent upon us as professors to bring that to our students, because it only enriches the environment we create for them.
You talked earlier about some of the mentors that you've had in your academic journey. What did you learn from those mentors about teaching? And
Yes, they all had different teaching styles. So I've tried to incorporate what I think are the best from each of them. Rodney, you know, Professor Porter, who was then in Oxford, was very clear. He would define the river for you. It is this wide and this deep, and you swim within that. That's it. Okay, that is all. So he posed the question, and I'll tell you this story because it is quite instructive. One time he did pose a question to me about how come our bodies react to foreign bodies, you know, the antigens. They come in, they breach our defenses, and you can either get sick or not get sick, whatever it is. But our bodies tend to produce antibodies, which tend to lock them, neutralize them, or eat them up, whatever. So his question to me was very simple. And he was quite Christian in his thoughts, even though one could assert that the question was bordered on silly. His assertion was simple, that our bodies contain all the antibodies we need against all the antigens in the world. And I was to try and find out why. That was it. Find out why he believed that, because he believed it. So the next week, I couldn't find. I'd read all the relevant papers, including his own, and couldn't come up with the answer. So we talked for about one hour. And then he says, well, let's meet again next week. And the question is the same. It went on for 3 weeks. So one time I said, Prof, you may know the answer, you know, but you've strung me along for 3 weeks. What gives? He laughs and says, no, I don't know the answer. You know, why don't you try it again and let's talk next week? So in 1 month, we're talking about antigen antibody, the lock and key mechanism. Well, I got frustrated and I said, hey, you know, like, tell me. And he says, Erasmus, when I tell you I don't know, I don't know. The lesson in terms of teaching is that don't be scared to tell your students you don't know. Some of my colleagues tend to assume that they have to know everything. One, I learned that I had to be really, really prepared. But if there's a question that you don't know, say you don't know and you try and find the answer, or engage the students so that together you find a pathway to find that answer. So that was Rodney. Larry was an open book. He will give you the book, open it, and says, I'm not interested in what is in the book. I'm interested in how you connect the dots. Do you see? So I use it. The learning style was very different. One was quite oral, Rodney. For Larry, it could be, yes, you could write it, but if you preferred, you could discuss your answers with him. I also learned that. So I used the different techniques in terms of creating that environment. Some of the students are very good at writing their answers. Some are very good in terms of discussion. Some of them are very good in working in groups. So in my teaching, you know, environment, I tend to use all three. You know, one, in the project aspect of it, they learn teamwork, they learn conflict resolution, they learn the fact that they have to interact, and exchange ideas to try and answer the question.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
Yeah.
Very fascinating, yes.
My work in assessment, we talk about multiple modes of measuring that. If you only do written assignments and students have a capacity with oral language they don't have with written language, then sometimes you're introducing irrelevant factors into your measurements. So that's a great practice to balance that out. In your own practice, you began to talk a bit about this, but in your own practice, how would you describe your teaching practice? What does it look like to sit in a classroom that you're
I mean, in terms of getting, in terms of getting ready, I tend to say this is what I want you to be able to do once we finish this module or finish this term. And these are the competencies that I really want you to be able to demonstrate. Okay, so it's and for me, it's a contract between myself and the students. Right. I actually have it, that this is the contract I have with you. And that if you are not able to demonstrate those kinds of competencies, then I've done something wrong, okay? And in the end, the students and I decide what is the best way to value those competencies. So it is upfront. This is where we are going to go in terms of nutritional principles, in terms of biochemistry. And I come prepared, you know, knowing that, yes, I know a little bit more of the content than they do. But I'll always ask the question, this is where we are going to go. How are we going to get there? And I'm not too worried about how long it takes us to get there. So I may not finish the content of the syllabus. Seriously. I may not finish the content of the syllabus. But for me, have they demonstrated the competencies, or are they able to demonstrate those competencies? For example, are they able to propose a hypothesis? Are they able to form objectives? Are they able to design the project to be able to answer those type of questions? That to me is fascinating. It's not necessarily whether the hypothesis is right or wrong, but the fact that they can go and from the classroom form those hypotheses, discuss it, and try and explain to you why they arrived at the particular answer they arrived at. That to me is what has informed my way of teaching. So what do you try to achieve in your course? When you think about the students and what you're trying to achieve in terms of their development, their growth, as students, as human beings, what do you try to achieve in your teaching? It is a very good question, because I will sit here and say, yes, I was grounded in science. My belief in terms of has almost always been in the liberal education aspect of it. So yes, the four themes of liberal education for me, even as a scientist, relatively speaking, as a researcher, relatively speaking, in terms of my students, is whether they are able to think critically. Can they really, and do they have the breadth and depth? And do they see themselves as being valuable to society and being able to articulate it, right? And are they able to connect the dots? So I was lucky. I did immunology, I did biochemistry, I did physiology, and I did nutrition. Try and connect those dots. I try and bring that to the classroom, that yes, you can call yourself a biochemist, but are you able to understand the principles of nutrition, for example, and are you able to connect the dots? So for my own graduate students, and I've mentored between about 32 PhDs and master students in my academic career, it's always been, are you able to articulate and let people see the value of the stance you've taken? And are you able to listen to them to understand where they are coming from and connect those dots? That to me has informed how I do what I do.
You mentioned liberal education. Obviously, that's one of the pillars that the University of Lethbridge is built on, and there's a major investment in growing our liberal ed program. How do you see the liberal ed program at the U of L? How do you see it building the kind of students that you envision?
And I'll be quite clear with you. One of the reasons I came here, you know, from the U of A was my belief, and I've told you this already, my belief in liberal education as the platform which should be the springboard for everything we do. Coming from a biochemist, nutritionist, this may come as a shock to some people. I really believe that the University of Lethbridge has an opportunity to have students who leave this place have the uniqueness which differentiates them from other students from other universities, not only in Alberta, but across the country and even in the world. Why do I say that? There are some universities where if you want to study mathematics, you need to take about 37 courses in mathematics. Yes, you know, great. But are they able to bring value in the place they work? How many people employ mathematicians? Did you see how many people employ mathematicians? Maybe in academia, but in everyday life, they employ you, you have a math skill set, but ability to work with others, ability to connect the dots, ability to think critically are all elements which will make you be successful where you are. So you're studying biochemistry, and so what? How does that translate into how you bring value to the corporation you work? So I think, was it Google which wanted the very best in the world? So they went to the best schools, the best universities, recruited the best. And I think, was it about 15 years into it? And Google has lots of data. They went back to take a look at the attributes of those who stayed, the attributes of those they promoted, the attributes of those they let go. They just took a look at the data. Guess which people stayed? The people with a liberal education, in addition to the so-called discipline degrees. So now Google will employ you when you have some critical thinking skills, you have the breadth, you connect, and you find yourself valuable. It's not specific to the discipline. Yes, they employ you for your math, skill set, but they look for the others. The University of Lethbridge is on that pathway. And I really believe, and the provost, Andy Hakin, and myself, again, don't see any daylight between the research enterprise, the academic enterprise, relative to liberal education.
I met with the provost a while ago, and we were talking about the new science building that's being built here, and the fact that it's explicitly designed to allow for integration across areas and multiple different kinds of disciplines. And he made a comment that was quite interesting to me, that that this is the future of scientific research, that sort of research in the peer fields, we've kind of hit and plumbed most of that area, and that the real future research is the interconnections and the thinking across disciplines. And how do you see that kind of mindset fitting within a liberal education focus?
It has to be. There's no doubt in my mind that on the research side, you know, those who think their field is solely their field find themselves that they are not able to solve the problems. The problems of the world, as we know it, are complicated and complex. And you need the interdisciplinary aspect of it. So the destination project, the destination phase 1, that beautiful building which will be opened in 2019, is a showpiece. It's again one of the things that we at the University of Lethbridge will begin to show the world, that part of it is infused with the elements of liberal education. And the fact that we are going to select a dean to be a dean of liberal education at the University of Lethbridge, which I think may be the first that I know of, a dean of liberal education, not liberal arts, but liberal education. It will showcase, and it entwines with the science building to say our people who leave this place will be unique. They'll be unique because there's the foundation of liberal education on the science side, on the art side, on the social sciences side, on the fine arts side, on education, in management. Everybody who comes here will have a brush with the elements of liberal education before they leave this place. And whether they see themselves as the top scientists in the world, they will leave this place with a brush of liberal education. And the way the building is designed is to make that happen.
So in terms of the research office at the university, how does the research office support the development of that kind of research and then the teaching that goes along with it at an institution like this?
Yeah, the new research plan, you know, I say academic because one, the research plan is aligned with the academic plan, which is Andy Hickens' plan, and it's in synergy with the overall plan of the university. That's the way we've looked at it. So from the lens of research and academics, and from the platform of liberal education, how do we elevate research at the University of Lethbridge? Okay, how do we elevate research? How do we, as one of the top universities in terms of dealing with our undergraduate students, how do we get them immersed in research at the very beginning? Number three, how do we, you know, get them as students of ours, bring value to the community they serve? Okay, how do we connect with the community we serve, and how do we bring in the community we serve onto campus, feeling free to come and ask questions? As for example, in a science building, it doesn't matter who they are, but they can come and watch science on display, and they can ask the questions. So the K to 12 can come. Anybody can come, relatively speaking, to say, how are you guys doing in terms of the academics and the research? We go hand in hand, and I'll go back to that, to the fact that research informs teaching, and teaching informs research. So research informs the academic side, then academic side informs the research side. And all these are included in the strategic plan, working closely with Andy's group and working closely with the deans of the University of Lethbridge.
Shift gears a little bit. You talked earlier about in your career, you've been a chair, a department chair, you've led at different levels within an institution. And in those roles, how do you build faculty capacity around excellence in teaching and excellence in research? What are some of the things that you've done in terms of that work?
One can say that if you want to grow the research component, you can start by hiring the very bright professors you can, and those who have a passion to be in the academy. And what does that mean? It means that they should have a passion for teaching, you know, so I look for that. They should have a passion for research, and they should have a passion for service. So in mine, and I've hired over my administrative life close to 72 faculty members. I always go back to say that, yes, you have a PhD, fine. How does that translate in terms of moving the university, the unit you have, forward? And how are you going to do that? And what can we do to help you achieve that? So part of it is mentoring, creating an environment for new faculty members to have somebody who mentors them. Which doors open, which doors don't open. So for example, I hire you, you're on probation, I reserve the right to come and watch you teach. I reserve the right to ask your peers who know a little bit about teaching and experience to come and watch you teach. And we'll give you the feedback in terms of how you interact with students. So in my department and in my faculty, that was what we did. We hired based on the competencies of one. The fact that you'll be mentored, the fact that we'll make sure that we create an environment for you to succeed and give you the feedback. And at the university where I was before, there was a peer group which you could call upon in terms of saying, I have a professor who is struggling in terms of teaching. What can you do to help him? What can you do to help her? Those were the attributes, and that's the environment I created. At the same time, at the end of the year, when you as a professor came to me for your evaluation, I had 4 questions which the students would have answered relative to how they felt you had performed in terms of their teaching, and whether they would recommend you to do that course again. It was one of those things. So yes, the people I hired, I held their feet to the fire.
And what were what did you notice? What did you notice in terms of how people responded to that, and what some of the challenges related to that were?
Yeah, having said that, I mean, research informs teaching and teaching informs research. There are still some of our colleagues who really believe that research is what they are very good at, and therefore leave them alone. The fact that they don't want to teach should not be held against them. So I remember writing a letter when I had the Associate Vice President Academic and Associate Vice President Research portfolio, writing a letter to deans, telling them that the very top researchers, or whatever they call themselves, were not going to be exempt from teaching. That's how strongly I believe in it. And that it had to be extraordinary circumstances for somebody not to be engaged in teaching. Because after all, why are we here if not for the students?
I think there's a trend, I think, across Canadian universities to see fewer and fewer tenure stream positions and more instructor, other types of positions that have a lower sort of research load to them. What are your thoughts on sort of that trend, and what our universities need to do in order to maintain quality?
There are so many variables in terms of the trend to go to sessionals, and you know, and I'm sure you know some of those. And for me, it is the budget, and we've seen a downward slope in terms of the dollars which come from the province. And remember that universities are not allowed to run deficits. Overall, there has to be balance. So most of the universities are making those decisions based on the budgetary concerns they have. So what do we need to do? And we've talked about it at the University of Lethbridge, that there must be alternate sources of funds which come in. And we should be in a discussion with the government to say, if we bring in these dollars, let's say on the research enterprise, it may be from industry. And insofar as we can assert the academic freedoms of our researchers will not be compromised, we should be able to use some of those dollars to fill the gap. Because I sincerely and strongly still believe in research done by the PIs, because the generation of the new knowledge comes from research. It is a very difficult question in terms of how to solve it, but part of it is to bring in alternate sources of funding. You know, because I don't believe that we should continue on the pathway of just having sessionals or tutors who only teach, because we'll be doing a disservice to the students we produce. That is my personal opinion.
And to the sessionals that we hire.
Yes.
I mean, it's a difficult and challenging position to find yourself in.
Yes,
for sure.
And we talk about it at the upper administration all the time. You know, yes, it's for sessionals. It may be a cheap way of getting them to come in and teach, but boy, what a loss of potential! And when one goes that way, So
there's a role then that you see the research office in playing in terms of building financial capacity then for maintaining teaching quality through these types of endeavors.
For sure. I mean, one can say that, call it industry-based research chairs, right? You know, and since I've been here, we've at least had one. You know, the potato growers were cognizant of questions they could ask, but their questions were not just research-based. They want the next generation of knowledgeable people they can employ. Because growing potatoes now is not the same way as potatoes were grown before. You need people who are really knowledgeable relative to precision irrigation, when do you apply the pesticides, being sustainable. So their mandate was hire somebody who can do the research, but also get somebody who has the attribute to be in front of these students and help prepare the next generation. So yes, you know, and they paid for it. They put $1 million on the table, basically, matched by the federal government and matched by the provincial government to create this position. And we're doing more of it, you know, trying to have the interface where the industry sees value to at least help pay and for the salaries and the research programs of these people they bring in. But once they are here, they will not only do research, they will also have to teach.
Right. Yeah.
They will not be exempt from teaching.
Yeah. So there's a role for industry to say, we see a need. We see a need to build the next generation of industry professionals, leaders, and there's a way that we can influence that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And making sure, you know, that one I have to be very clear, making sure that within the policies and the independence of the university professor, that those values are maintained. So the fact that we have a research chair in a particular product does not mean that the research is going to be biased,
Right.
and only the positive ones will be shown to those growers. No. If you take the potato growers, they are very aware that the independence of this particular professor is paramount. Demetrio would do the best he can to answer the questions they have, be able to publish and advance knowledge, and to be able to say if some of the results he gets are not what they wanted to hear. He's free to be able to publish.
So the influence isn't so much shaping the research as in identifying this as an area where if we invest the right money, we can get the right people in to help build that capacity.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It is finding that area where the questions need to be asked, and then letting the PI, in this case, the potato chair researcher, find the necessary elements which help answer those questions. Yes.
Yeah. It's a fascinating model.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And we'll get more of those.
Yeah. What about areas, so I mean industry obviously is an area, what about areas where, more in the area of social issues, social entrepreneurship, those sort of things, where maybe there's not an industry, it's not as easy, I guess, for industry to say, yes, this is a specific area where, how do you attract support in those areas for that kind of research work?
And again, taking a look, since I've told you in terms of my belief in liberal education, there's an element in terms of the social sciences, the humanities and fine arts, which maybe was missing before in the research enterprise. So what we've done now is to get an associate vice president research, Claudia Malacrida, who has competencies in those areas to say, how best do we really show value into what we do on the social sciences, social innovation, and connect with the community. Because once you've done that, you'll be surprised how many of them are willing to say, hey, this is what I'm willing to give you. So yes, there have been some donations now in the social side to say, they see the social innovation. They see those kinds of things we are doing, and they're willing to help. And the other way I look at it is this. So if you take Hovan Ray, one of the big donors to the university, he's now taking a look at some of his friends who are not necessarily going to give in the sciences or the industry-based side, but are willing, and we are in conversation with some of them right now to say, what can you do to ensure that, for example, liberal education survives at the University of Lethbridge? And they are willing to, I wish I could tell you a little bit more, but there are some, stay tuned. There will be some announcements made on the social innovation side soon at the University of Lethbridge relative to what has happened. And so if you take a look at the next phase of fundraising, there are some elements which are there, which are based on the social sciences, the humanities and fine arts, and not industries. There are people here in Lethbridge, there are people in southern Alberta, even to the north of us in Calgary, willing to say, oh, this is what you are doing on the social innovation side, come and talk to me.
So in many ways, the focus on liberal education helps to sell that message.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, David. Yes. It's been very fruitful. And last Friday we met with a couple willing to say, what can we do to help relative to the infusion of liberal education in the destination project.
Yeah, it's a model that in some ways, it strikes me, maybe frees you or frees us as an institution from some of the challenges that other institutions had around named chairs or industry-funded chairs. If the purpose of the research is around a broader liberal ed focus, it's not like I as a funder might have a specific vested interest in a specific type of outcome. And so you maybe avoid some of that concern around the funder trying to drive the agenda as well.
That is true, and I think the U of L is beginning to make a good case for itself in terms of the connection it has with the community it serves. Yes.
Shifting gears again a little bit, University of Lethbridge has been recognized for a number of years now as being a leader in undergraduate research and undergraduate research opportunities. And one of the themes of the Ed Talks I've been doing this year is to look at sort of innovative or different kinds of learning experiences for students. And from your perspective, what's the learning value of an undergraduate student being involved in research projects with their professors?
Yes, I mean, I think I've mentioned it already. If not, I'll say it again. The uniqueness of University of Lethbridge in the fact that I believe it ranks the first, you know, or among the very top universities, which involves its undergraduate students in research and actually shows value by publications, for example, in some of the top journals. And if you take some of the even high school all the way to undergraduates, the iGEM, you know, project, which they try to solve some of the world's problems in terms of microbiology, in terms of being able to detect pathogens in ambulances, and how do you make sure that the vehicles are clean, you know. Those kinds of things, they take those projects, go out and compete against the best in the world and win gold, you know. So yes, in terms of the University of Lethbridge, there's no way we are going to undercut the involvement of undergraduate students in research, because one, it gets their feet wet. Two, they learn the fundamentals of liberal education all the way through to conflict resolution. And believe it or not, some of them are beginning to think of forming companies because of the experiences they had and some of the results they obtained in doing some of the research projects they did here. It is fascinating to watch it, you know, and they will be in Lethbridge. You know, those companies that I'm talking about are going to be formed. So one, even though most people think of research as being done by PDFs, by professors and by graduate students, at the University of Lethbridge, the commitment to use undergraduate students to get their feet wet and their hands dirty pays dividends, because they see the value again in terms of solving some of the problems of the world through being involved in research.
I had the fortune of being on the research committee for the university and got to adjudicate some of the Chinook award applications, which is the fund for our undergraduate student researchers, and we're just constantly amazed.
It is fascinating. It is fascinating. It is. And you may not know this, but some of the students from the University of Alberta are actually coming here to work with HJ, you know, because of the involvement of undergraduate students in his lab in research. So he allows some of these students who've heard about it to come and work in his lab. So the word is getting out relative to the importance of, or the value that University of Lethbridge places on undergraduate students being involved in research. Yes, it is.
Yeah, the quality of the students that applied to these just amazed me. It was very humbling.
It is. It is.
Thinking of my own undergraduate.
It is brilliant. It is, and it's something that we are not going to undercut. Even as we, you know, emphasize research and stuff like that, the undergraduate student experience here. And even on the graduate side, we have something called Thrive, which basically says you, as a graduate student, will learn some of the elements of liberal education. You know, this place is on the threshold of greatness due to the uniqueness of the students we produce. What can I say?
There's something about a university of this size that enables us to do things that are different from from a larger institution.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. That part of what I believe in is the interaction between the students and the professors. You know, it's small enough, you know, but also big enough in terms of where we want to go. You know, the size is nearly perfect.
Yeah, that's what drew me here from Ottawa when I was at the university there. Yeah. When you look to the future, what are some of the things you see for the future, the growth of the University of Lethbridge and the research, teaching capacity, those things?
The University of Lethbridge is on a threshold of saying we need professional programs.
Right.
Okay, let's be very clear about it. And one of the ways by which we can grow basically is through the professional program. So be it engineering, be it in the health and wellness side, for example, will be quite critical as we move forward. Because to move from the undergraduate categories in terms of rankings into the comprehensive research categories, what they look for will be the professional programs. So I can assert that we are very good in terms of what we do right now. In the next 50 years is how do we continue to keep growing and maintain the quality of what we do right now. And that, to me, means a growth in the graduate program side, a growth in the undergraduate aspect of the enterprise through professional programs and through the involvement of industry, as I've indicated before, and through the involvement of people who can help us on the social innovation side so that we become, as it were, a very valuable part of the society we serve, both regionally, nationally and internationally. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, it's a bold vision, but
we have very good people here, including yourself as one of the energetic professors we have. We do, and I can say that to you, David.
So we were talking about professional programs and potential future directions and that. What do you see the value in moving towards bringing those types of programs to the university? What are some of the challenges that they might create for an institution like the University of Lethbridge?
And in terms of professional, I've stated, and I'll stick to it relative to that. As we grow, there will be a need for professional programs, such as engineering. Why do I say that? If you take agriculture, for example, we produce 40% of the GDP in agriculture in the South. Okay, this place will not be what it is without the ability to, in terms of irrigation. So the engineering around irrigation is paramount. The policies around irrigation is paramount, right? You know, so for us to use that local knowledge that we do have, but then to send our students outside the region doesn't make sense to me. You know, so how do we grow and bring value to the community we serve? One of the areas is to move into the professional programming, which is of value to us, not because we are in competition with any other university, but the fact that that is where the growth is. That is where, if you take a look at some of the people investing in our region, Cavendish, $360 million investment. They've told us that the people they need in the future will be the ones with engineering degrees. Okay, and all I'm asserting is that yes, this is an opportunity in terms of the local knowledge we have to go into those kinds of fields which benefit the industries, for example, and the people who've placed their hopes and trust in us.
It very much fits the vision of liberal education you were talking about as well, right? By expanding the pools of knowledge that students in a liberal education
That's an excellent point in terms of, yes, the breadth of the expertise we have. So we don't keep exporting the people we produce, you know, because apparently close to 75% of our students come from outside, but 85% of what we produce leave. How do we, in terms of some of those industries establishing here, how do we give them the pool of knowledge and the people with those competences to work in those industries and to work in the communities that we serve?
The word communities come up quite often as we've been talking in that. Can you talk about your view of the university as a member of the community? What is its responsibility? What role does it play?
It is huge. The history of the University of Lethbridge was that it was formed, it was advocated for and formed and built, and the pressure on the government to let the Lethbridge have a university was due to the community. There was nothing on the west side. So they see the tangible benefits of the establishment of the University of Lethbridge and the building on the west side. We now form about 45% of the population. So they've seen that growth. And it's due to the interconnection and the value of the university to this particular community, right? We're built by the community. We owe it to ourselves to remain connected to this community, because without them, this building would not have been built. Right. The support that they gave us to build the destination building wouldn't have happened if they didn't see value to us. So the president, the vice presidents, and the people of this university remain. And part of the theme in the research plan is connection and the translation of knowledge to enhance the lives of the people of the city of Lethbridge in the south. This is what we as a university owe to ourselves and we owe to this particular community. So yes, you hear me talk about community all the time. Because without the foundation of this particular community, without the support of this community, this university would be just like any other university, and we are different.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now I think back when I came here, one of the reasons I came was because the relationship that our education faculty here had with schools. It's just well known that there was an investment in the South, in the schools, that as a researcher made a lot of sense because it opened doors and it opened access. Do you see that relationship in other faculties in terms of benefiting research and researchers and students?
I would say that if you take the Penny Building, okay, the Penny Building, some of the research aspects of it, whether it's in psychology and in neuroscience, we've opened avenues for them to be able to connect with the community. And it was not done by accident. It was quite deliberate to have a face of the university downtown to say that we are part of this community. We are not just on the west side. we are part of this community. So you are right. And I'm just going through a process of allocation of another space for another professor who is interested in the FNMI, the First Nations, Métis and Inuit aspects of it. She will be based in the Penny Building.
Oh, okay. And what's the advantage? What's the value of being based downtown for someone like that?
Well, I mean, that they don't see us, if I don't think they do, as an elitist, standoffish community. They see us as part of the community that we actually serve. So for us, the interaction becomes immediate. One, they don't have to come across whoop up, you know, but it's immediate. But to be serious, they see us as being able to connect with them and to be able to help solve some of their problems that they do have. That's the way I see it. And for us, it shows that we place emphasis that we are here to be part of the community and we are here to serve the community.
What I learned coming into the faculty here, you know, you see the reputation and you understand there's the connection, and then you come in and you realize how much of an investment of time and energy it takes to build that kind of relationship and that kind of reputation. And you know, we, like you say, it's not about sitting in an ivory tower somewhere. It's about being out there, being in schools, being in the community, being actively engaged and actively involved, and that's an enormous investment.
And we'll continue to invest in that enterprise. We will continue to invest.
Well, that brings us, I think, to the end of our hour together. I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time and speaking with us and sharing your experience, your perspectives, and your passion.
David, I really enjoyed it. You know, and I'm passionate because I believe in the University of Lethbridge, and we'll make great things happen. Including the involvement of yourself.
Well, thank you. We're fortunate to have that. So, thank you again.
Thanks again. Thank you. much.